We're going to look at using basically iPads or video cameras to record games, to capture clips, and how to use them productively in this session. When you've got the clips, it's important to remember what you do with them. There's a lot of options, but the first thing to remember is that they're only there to inform your observations of the game. They're not there to take place of your input to the referees. That they shouldn't be your only form. They're there to support what you do. They're a great way to pose questions with a video saying, what did you think when you blew this? Do you think you were in the right position to blow this? Could you explain why you called this, etc.? So they're great ways to generate question-answer situations. They should be viewable. Like if you've recorded some clips on your phone, it's not really that useful to hold it up in front of two referees and say, watch this. It should be a reasonable size screen, should be clear, and they should be able to watch it in a relaxed manner. It's a good idea to trim it so you don't have to wait through 10-20 seconds of nothing before you get to the actual point you want to make. And you shouldn't be fishing through a minute clip to find out what you're trying to highlight. It should have been trimmed in advance. The clips themselves, they can be just displayed straight to the referees after the game, or they can be shared via a number of ways. Dropbox, YouTube, or email are the most common ones. But we do ask that if you do share them via these options, that you do CC or copy the link to Tim Mills so he has an overview of what's going on. The app we're using is replacing Precorder Pro, which is no longer available for iOS 11. It's called Video Capture the Moment. It costs about $6 or $7 and does basically the same thing, but I think a little bit better. It's worth knowing that the Android version is, according to the developer, a long way away. It's just too tedious an effort to create one for each individual Android phone because they're not all compatible. Okay, what does it look like? Well, this is a landscape view using a phone. So you see basically whatever the phone's looking at and the icons across the bottom of the screen. We'll look at what they do individually. First one, I think the most important one is setting it up, is the settings button. If you push it, you get a drop-down list that gives you the choice of resolutions and frame rates, frames per second. We'd be suggesting you don't use 60 frames per second. It makes the file far too big and it's just unnecessary for general viewing, and 1280 by 720 is a good size if you can get that on your iPad. Depending on what model iPad you have, how old it is, you might get different options here, but we wouldn't be going in any case for a 60 frame per second video. The second one down the bottom is the camera button. This swaps from front to back camera, but it's unlikely you'll be doing that while you're videoing a game. And this camera button, when you disable it, makes the little camera swapping button disappear, so you just get the basic screen without the camera button. The next one to look at is what's called the buffer. It's how long the video will store in memory before you push the record button. It defaults to 5 seconds, and the way you change that is by pushing the little clock button. It'll go up, I think, up to 20 seconds, but keep in mind, the longer the buffer, the bigger the file, and really 5 to 8 seconds in our estimation should be more than enough for you to see an incident you want to record and get down and hit the record button. So leaving it at 5, when you do want to record something, you would hit the one I left out. The buffer itself is depending on your orientation. We are in landscape mode and the little man there is orange. If you were to put your iPad into portrait mode, straight up and down it would go grey. You'd have to touch that button to redo the buffer because you've changed orientation, but you don't need to worry about that if you're always in landscape mode. What is in the buffer of the machine is able to be viewed. The little arrow in the right hand corner, if you push it, you'll actually get a little square on the screen that shows you the movie that is being buffered as you are looking at the screen. Not all that much help, but it's interesting. Most people will just leave that as an arrow, and you can toggle back and forth just by touching the arrow. Pushing the record button does what you'd expect it to. it changes the button into a record, REC, and it's now recording the live footage on the screen. When you've had sufficient of that, you push the button again, it changes to an open square and says finishing, and it's then saving that file direct to your camera roll without your intervening at all. To get an overview of what this really means, if you've got your buffer set to 5 seconds and a foul or something occurs during this period, when you hit the record button, the machine or the item goes into record mode for however long you want to go for. You push the button again and it stops. So you've got the 5-second buffer and the 10-second video section. These are saved away as a 15-second clip to the camera roll. Now the foul can have occurred anywhere during that 5-second period and it'll still be within the 15-second clip. Clearly, the sooner you push the record button after the event occurs, the better, in that you haven't got a lot of blank, nothing happening footage. Unless, of course, there's a fight developing or some sort of action, you want to record the official coming to the table after the foul, then obviously you'd leave it go that bit longer. If you did increase, say, your buffer to 8 seconds, and you push the record button and then 3 seconds after you finished it, then you'd have an 11-second clip, which is going to be smaller, will have captured the foul, and if there's no other activity you wanted to record, then it's a more efficient way of saving the clip. Because we all remember that the shorter the clip, the smaller the file size will be, and the easier it will be to transfer. It's also a good idea to trim the clip before you show people or share it, and you should be aware of how to trim clips just using the basic photo app on the iPad or iPhone. There are many other possibilities that you can look at to modify your clips. One important thing that not many people do, I'm sure you're aware of it, you can talk while you're clipping. So while you're looking at an incident and you see, oh, that might have been a foul, when you see something, verbalise it. Say, oh, why didn't you call that? Could you explain your position on that call while the camera is running? And then when you get the clip back to talk to the officials, your voice will be in the background. Clearly you need to be a bit conscious of what you say. There's also an option to save it to Notes, which is an app that is on all iPads and iPhones. It's a nice efficient way to collect clips, and you can comment on them using just a few words quite easily. You end up with something like shown on the screen with the clips in a note, and what you've typed about the note is just above it, and then the red circle at the top of the screen highlights the fact that you're then able to share that either via email or messages to people's computers or phones as you see fit. There are lots of other possibilities. These all probably involve taking the clips home and doing it at home away from the venue. Combine them into iMovie, which is quite a powerful video editing program that you do need to have a bit of practice at in order to make maximum use of. There's another one called Qwik, Q-U-I-K. It's an app downloadable from the App Store, and it joins apps together and automatically puts little transitions and changes colour, adds music without you doing anything. It's just a fun app to let the officials look at themselves. There's no real diagnostic value. It's just a good way to get some clips together into a little movie. Another possibility is to use an app called Filmora Go. It allows you to do things like add filters to slow down sections of a clip, to add little paper planes that fly around everywhere. Again, just for a bit of fun. You can also add titles and so forth. But all of these are options that you can use just to make it a bit more interesting. But keep in mind, the purpose of the clips is to support what you're saying to the officials and perhaps add a bit of enjoyment to it, not to replace what you're doing.